Gallery C focuses on the colonial era. The story begins in 1453 and ends in 1945. Centuries ago, goods from the East were shipped to Europe through the Middle East. In 1453, the Muslim Ottoman Empire conquered Constantinople, capital of the Christian Byzantine Empire. This forced European traders to pay fees to Muslim ship operators and taxes to Muslim governments. The Europeans didn't like it. They wanted to find another route. In 1488, the first European ship rounded the tip of Africa. Its captain, Bartolomeu Diaz, named it the Cape of Storms. The King of Portugal changed the name to Cape of Good Hope because it held out hope of glory and gold for himself and disgrace to the God of the Muslims. 10 years later, another Portuguese, Vasco da Gama, rounded the Cape, sailed all the way to India and returned with spices, like those displayed in Gallery B. Da Gama's voyage showed that it was now possible to bring goods to Europe without paying shipping fees and taxes to Muslims. By 1503, the Portuguese had conquered Calicut in India and constructed a fort in Kochi. They had also destroyed mosques as revenge for Muslim action since the fall of Constantinople. In 1509, the King of Portugal sent Diego Lopez de Siqueira to Malacca to set up a trading post. Things began well, but soon turned sour. The Sultan put Siqueira's men in prison, but Siqueira avoided arrest and returned to India and then to Portugal to report what happened. In 1511, Afonso de Albuquerque, governor of Portuguese India, arrived in Malacca to conquer it for Portugal. After 40 days of battle, he succeeded. The Sultan retreated south and established a base in Johor, from which he worked to regain Malacca. In 1511, Malacca was one of the wealthiest cities in the world. After taking Malacca, Albuquerque quickly began building a fort to secure Malacca's wealth and to resist attacks. He called it a Famosa. Then he loaded Malacca's wealth onto 3 ships and set sail for Portugal. Most of the treasure was on a ship called the Flor de la Mar. Here's a model of it. It sank off Sumatra, location unknown. Some say that its cargo, if recovered, will be worth over $2 billion. Portuguese occupation of Malacca was 130 years of frequent attacks by Malays from the peninsula, aided by Bugis and Acehnese from across the straits in Sumatra. Here's a plan of the fort and some of the weapons used at that time. Here's a replica of Porta da Santiago, a gateway, the only surviving part of the fort. On the top, you see the letters VOC. That's the acronym for the name of the Dutch East India Company, which was formed in 1602. It was publicly listed. Anyone could buy or sell shares in it, like we can trade shares in Google. The VOC was the first ever listed company, but unlike Google, it had armies and the power to sign treaties with countries. The Dutch wanted a share of the spice trade and wanted to end the income Spain got from it. Yes, Spain, because in 1580, the Roman Catholic King of Spain became also the King of Portugal, and he ruled the newly Protestant Dutch lands with an iron hand. So the Dutch attacked Malacca. They were helped by Malays from the peninsula and from Sumatra, led by descendants of the last Sultan of Malacca. The Dutch tried several times to conquer Malacca. In 1606, they battled for 3 months. These relics are from that battle, called the Battle of Cape Machado, or Tanjong Tuan. It ended with a 2-day sea battle. The Dutch lost. 35 years later, they attacked again. The battle lasted for over 5 months. The war strategies included starvation, cannons, and hand-to-hand combat. The Dutch won in 1641. For the Portuguese, Malacca was their main port. But for the Dutch, Batavia, now known as Jakarta, was their main port. They took Malacca only to prevent others from controlling the straits, but they did use Malacca for trading in tin from the peninsula and from Sumatra. Here we have some artifacts from the Dutch era. VOC plates are widely found in former Dutch colonies, including Sri Lanka and Indonesia. The Dutch ruled Malacca for 154 years, till 1795. In 1795, the French invaded the Dutch homelands. The Dutch Prince of Oranje William V, led the resistance to the French. He moved all overseas Dutch resources to fight the French in Europe. To achieve that goal, he handed control of Malacca to the British for the short term. He did this through the Q letters, which he issued from England. In 1818, after ending their European battles, the Dutch came back. Remember I said earlier that of the fort, only one gate remains? Now I'll explain why. The British decided to make Malacca useless as a naval base before returning it, so they blew up the fort. It so happened that Stamford Raffles, a British officer, arrived in Malacca just as the soldiers were preparing to blow up Porta da Santiago, which was all that remained of the fort. Raffles stopped them. Now I'll speak about the British period. The Portuguese and the Dutch entered Malaya through battles, but the British entered through treaties. By signing treaties with local rulers, Francis Light acquired Penang for the British from the ruler of Kedah in 1786, and Stamford Raffles acquired Singapore from the ruler of Johor in 1819. In exchange, the rulers received recognition and salaries. In 1824, through a treaty with the Dutch called the Anglo-Dutch Treaty, the British acquired Malacca from the Dutch. They traded it for Bencoolen in Sumatra. In 1826, the British East India Company began ruling Singapore, Penang, and Malacca as one entity, the Straits Settlements. In 1867, the company transferred these settlements to the British Crown. In 1874, 50 years after the Anglo-Dutch Treaty, the Panko Agreement was signed. This was the real start of British control in the mainland. The story is tied to the huge demand for tin cans during the American Civil War, the Industrial Revolution's need for tin, and the demand for tin-based solder to join electric cables. In the 19th century, tin mining needed a lot of manual labor. At that time, if you didn't live in the Straits Settlements, everything you had or earned belonged to the ruler. You had no incentive to work hard and earn much, because you were only a serf of a feudal ruler. So, to mine tin, the Malay rulers brought in Chinese workers under a system of capitans, who were the liaison between laborers and rulers. The funders were Chinese in the Straits Settlements. Mining was exhausting work. Miners were at the mercy both of their employers and of secret societies because their chief pastimes, opium smoking and gambling, were controlled by the societies. In Perak, in the Larut tin mines controlled by a local chief called Nga Ibrahim, wars broke out between the Hai San, who was supported by Nga Ibrahim, and the Gi Hin, who was supported by Raja Abdullah. The flow of tin from Larut reduced to a trickle. Just before the last of the Larut wars, a conference of orang kaya or nobles in Perak had chosen Raja Ismail to be Sultan. Raja Abdullah felt he himself should have been chosen. Through friends, who were merchants, he sent a letter to the governor, Andrew Clark. He asked for British protection and a British officer to show him how to improve the administration of Perak. By this time, many Chinese and British merchants had already asked for British intervention. The result was the Panko Agreement, a copy of which is shown here. It recognized Abdullah as Sultan and appointed a British resident, whose advice the Sultan had to accept about everything except religion and customs. It was signed on a ship called H.M. Pluto. The British brought in a police chief called Captain Speedy and policemen from India. Soon order was restored in Larut. Tin began to flow again. The first resident, J.W.W. Birch, was assassinated by the ruling Orang Kaya when he tried to stop them from collecting taxes like they had before the Panko Agreement. The British responded to his assassination by executing 3 persons after trying them and finding them guilty. Sultan Abdullah was implicated. He was banished to the Seychelles. He was never allowed to return to Perak. The murder of Birch enabled the British to quickly gain control of Perak and the other states because they could use soldiers instead of negotiation to achieve their goals. In a supreme touch of irony, the melody for Malaya's national anthem was chosen by Abdullah. By 1883, Malaya was the world's largest producer of tin and remained so for about 100 years. Within 14 years of the Panko Treaty, Selangor, Negeri Sembilan, and Pahang had also accepted residents. In 1895, these states, with Perak, were brought under one government, Federated Malay States, headed by a resident general in Kuala Lumpur. There were 5 other states. In the north, Perlis, Kedah, Kelantan, and Terengganu, and in the south, Johor. Here's a replica of a gold and silver tree called Bunga Mas. Every 3 years, the northern states and Patani, today in Thailand, would send a Bunga Mas to the King of Siam to show that they accepted his kingship. In 1909, the British ended those Malayan states kowtowing to Siam by signing the Anglo-Siamese Treaty. The British immediately began working to get the other rulers to agree to their intervention. But 35 years had passed since the first resident was appointed, and it was clear that rule by residents reduced the power and prestige of the rulers. So the British devised a new system. The British appointee would be called an advisor. His advice had to be accepted by the state councils before implementation. The states slowly accepted advisors. Johor was the last to accept an advisor. That was in 1914. So, in 1914, the peninsula was ruled by 7 governments, namely the Strait Settlements, the Federated Malay States, and the 5 unfederated Malay states. There was no uniform law or administration until the Japanese occupation, which began in December 1941. Before I get to that, I'll tell you about rubber and Indians and show you some exhibits about tin. The growth of Malaya into the world's largest producer of rubber in 1929 involved smuggling of rubber seeds from Brazil by Henry Wickham and meticulous work by Henry Ridley to figure out how to grow rubber trees and tap them for latex. To grow the trees, rainforests had to be cut down, brush had to be burned, soil had to be prepared, no bulldozers, no excavators, no chainsaws. Seedlings had to be grown in nurseries, then transplanted. Trees had to be watered, weeded, fertilized, protected from pests. Had to be tapped early in the morning. The latex had to be collected, processed, shipped. Hundreds of thousands of laborers were needed. They had to endure snake bites, animal attacks, malaria, dysentery, typhoid. In British India, the British considered South Indians docile, easy to exploit. So they brought them to Malaya under a scheme they called a system of indentured labor. Scholars call it a new form of slavery. This is how the majority of Indians came to Malaya. I spoke earlier about tin, so I won't say much here. Just notice the laborers in the photo. They lived short lives of extreme misery, which they endured by smoking opium. Here's a model of a dredge. The British brought in the first dredge in 1913. Soon, dredges multiplied like rabbits. Tin production soared. Unemployment, hunger, and disease rates also soared. We have many other crops, such as coconuts, pepper, and rice. Also game beer, which people chewed with sireh, which is connected with tepat sireh sets which are shown in Gallery B. Decades ago, game beer was also important as a source of dye for leather products. We don't grow it anymore, but it's important because the first Chinese brought to Malaya as laborers worked in game beer plantations. Finally, we come to the Japanese invasion on the 8th of December 1941. All the British treaty commitments proved empty. They evacuated their own citizens, destroyed infrastructure, and abandoned the peninsula after a very brief resistance. The Japanese cycled to victory from the north to the south in just 10 weeks. The Japanese occupation lasted 3.5 years. It ended in September 1945. The Japanese shipped tens of thousands of Indians to Thailand to build a railway, which became known as the Death Railway. But many Indians also joined the Japanese-sponsored Indian National Army and fought for them in Burma against the British. The Japanese carried out sukching, which are mass murders of Chinese, because previously they had helped China fight the Japanese. Many Chinese joined the Malayan People's Anti-Japanese Army, organized by the Communist Party of Malaya. The Empaja, as it was called, put up a strong resistance using supplies and training provided by Force 136 of the British Special Operations Executive. In Gallery D, you'll see how the relationship of the Chinese with the British soured and turned bloody. Thank you for listening. I leave you with a summary chart of this presentation.